Okay, this is now the 5-minute tarot for the 8th of December 2017, and I'm calling it the 5-minute tarot because that's the series that I'm doing, but this is going to be a lot longer than 5 minutes, mainly because today I'd like, this is, if you've ever been struggling with anything in any area of life and you haven't found a solution, I want to give you the answer to everything, the solution to every problem. So it's going to take me more than 5 minutes to give you what I think is going on, to give you my current understanding of what I think is going on. And I invite your comments and suggestions and arguments and debate, because I know that I'm leaving out certain things, but maybe they would come up because of your comments, for instance. So I want to give you the ultimate answer to every question, and I have to lead up to it. I can't just tell you what it is. So I'm going to start somewhere, and here goes. I've also got, I've thought through the order in which I want to give you the information, and I've got it on screen in front of you so I don't get mixed up. I'm going to go off at tangents, but start with Seinfeld and then football, and then we go on to other things, but I'm going to get to the point eventually. And if it works for you and you can solve every problem, it will have been time well spent. Okay, so Seinfeld. There was an episode, or one of the Seinfeld episodes, where George Costanza lost $20 and Jerry put on an old suit jacket and he found a $20 bill in the pocket. And he made the point, okay, George loses $20, I find $20, everything evens out, everything balances out. And then later, I think later in that particular show, somebody cancels. Jerry had been signed up to do his act, his performance, and somebody cancelled, but then his agent called and offers him a new act on that same evening. So he makes a point that the act is cancelled and then I get a new act. So everything evens out in the long run. And that's kind of what we think, that we have ups and downs, we have good and bad, but don't worry because it's going to even out in the long run. And another example is with football, European football, that is, where you can get, I think, called a penalty kick, and the ball's 10 yards from the goal and you get to shoot the ball and you've got a good chance of scoring a goal, which is the important point. But it sometimes happens that in a game there's an obvious penalty and the referee misses it, right? And the team is really annoyed because they should have had a penalty. But commentators will often point out that maybe later in the season, the team that didn't get the penalty is going to get one that wasn't justified. So they make the comment, and people have the idea that over the course of time, everything is going to balance itself out. So maybe it's bad today, but it's okay. It's going to be better tomorrow. Or what goes wrong today is going to go right next week or next month. So what I want to say is this is not what's going on. We don't live actually in a world where there are ups and downs, where if something goes bad today or something is wrong today, it's going to be the opposite sometime in the future. Because we tend to think we live in a world of opposites. Somebody says, how heavy is that? And you don't know how heavy it is unless you've got some other object to compare it with. So how heavy is a feather compared to an elephant? The feather's very light, but compared to a pin, the feather's quite heavy. So we tend to use comparisons in that way to get an idea of what's going on. But when it comes to life and living, that's not what we should do. And it's also not what's going on. But that's how we think. So that we think we're maybe not so good today, but it's going to change and it's going to be better next week or next month or maybe tomorrow if we're lucky. Right? Because we think that if the adjustment takes place quickly, then it's lucky. Or we were lucky that we experienced that. So let's say there's some kind of situation that we don't like and we try to change it so that we make it better. But we can try that, but sometimes what we try doesn't work out, even though it ought to. So people on self-help groups and in books, they'll talk about what you do is you set your intention, or you make a list of what you want, or in some way you're reprogramming the subconscious mind, and it's going to bring this thing about and it's going to happen. Except that, and I know people who've written down what they want, and they put it in, they keep it in a wallet or a purse, and they look at the list 4 times a day to sort of reprogram things or to bring it about, and thinking it doesn't work. Occasionally it does, but that can be coincidence. But when we write down, I am going to be rich, or I am already rich, we know that we're fooling ourselves, that we're not really rich yet, or we're trying to fool ourselves, and we're trying to have to make a difference, but usually it doesn't work. And it's particularly easy to bring about negative consequences. I'm going to fail the exam, and it's easy to fail the exam. Whereas if you want to pass the exam but you haven't done any work, it's much more difficult to pass the exam. So bad stuff happens more easily than good stuff. And it can give us the impression that bad stuff is stronger or more powerful than good stuff. Okay, so that's part of the background. A second related idea that will come clear later is if you put a coin onto some water, it's going to sink. And if you put a piece of wood onto water, it's going to float. So we pick up the coin and the piece of wood, and we think that it's the weight that makes the coin sink, and it's the lack of weight that makes the coin float. And we think that's a rule. If it's heavy, it's going to sink. If it's not so heavy, it's going to float. But actually, when it comes to things sinking or floating, it's something else that's going on, because the law that determines whether something is going to sink or whether it's going to float, it's the law of the displacement. I think it's called the displacement of water, because water is quite heavy. So when you put something into the water, it will sink down a little bit. If the volume of water that it displaces is heavier than the weight of the object that's in the water, it's going to float. So it has to do with the displacement of water, and compared to the weight of the object that determines whether it's going to float. And that's why ships that weigh 1,000 tons can float, whereas a coin that weighs, I don't know, a few ounces or a couple of ounces, that's going to sink. So it's not the weight, it's the law to do with the displacement of water. So we can look at something and think we know what's going on, and it seems obvious that the coin is heavy, it's going to sink, whereas the wood isn't that heavy, it's going to float. But with a lot of things, there's some invisible or unknown law that's in operation. So I think the point I want to make is we have to be careful about our conclusions and our use of what is apparent, or looking at something and think it's obvious when it's actually not that obvious. Okay, I think that's kind of point 2. Okay, if you drive, you know that when you take off from the curb, you're supposed to look behind you to make sure that there's nothing in your blind spot. A lot of people, you're not supposed to just use your mirrors, but you're actually supposed to turn your head and look to make sure there's nobody there. So I once did something to my back, and you may have had the same kind of experience. So I tweaked my back, did something to it. And so I got in the car and I went like this quickly. I turned my head quickly. And, it was excruciating because my back, I'd forgotten about my back being sore or being damaged or whatever it happened to be. So I did this 2 or 3 times, and then I began to remember that I'm not supposed to turn my head quickly. If I do, I'm going to pay for it. right? So what happens is, and you probably know this kind of thing for yourself, you make the mistake a few times until you learn, and then you adjust your movements and your behavior to accommodate the situation, right? So for a while, I tweaked my back. So for a while, I walked differently, I sat differently, I drove differently, because I knew that no sudden movements, sudden jerky movements. So let's say you knock something off a table. It's easy to instinctively reach to grab it before it hits the floor. But if you forgot that your back is not quite right and you do it, you know you're going to wish you hadn't done it. So this pain or this difficulty or this uncomfortable whatever it is that you've got determines your future behavior, and it controls your behavior, and it controls you. Because what you're doing is, you know you've got the tweak in your back, so you have to compensate for it by walking differently, sitting differently, moving differently. You know that it's going to change, that there'll be a few days from now or whenever it happens to be, your back will be okay and you can go back to turning your head quickly from side to side. But during those few days, you compensate for it, and you might not go back to the original state once the situation has changed or once it's over. You might get so used to slowly turning your head to look back, right, that you keep turning your head slowly, even 2 months, 3 months later. It can change your behavior. And another point I'd like to make is that this pain or difficulty actually has an influence and a control that's disproportionate to its size. You can have a small twinge in your back, but it can alter everything about what you do, the way you walk, the way you stand, the way you sit, and so on. And it's a bit like if you've ever caught or had a raspberry pip or something, a little bit of a berry stuck between your teeth, and you're using your tongue to try and move it around and make it loose. You know that, or if you've ever had a tooth out, you know that the space in your mouth is really quite small, but when you're using your tongue to move around or to try and remove this little raspberry pip, the raspberry pip is like, it seems like this size. It's huge, although it's actually minuscule. So we can the size or the apparent size of the raspberry pip has a disproportionate, over the top influence on what seems to be going on. I'm not explaining that very well, but I think you know what I'm getting at. So let's say you have a problem. Think of some kind of problem or difficulty or something you want a solution to. If you go into the future, starting from living with the problem, you're taking the problem with you into the future, and you're seeing the future tainted with the difficulty. And it's as if your problem, if you have glasses or coloured glass, it's as if the problem is a particular shade of glass, and you're wearing glasses. So everything, when you look at everything around you, you see it through the coloured lens. So when you look into the future, you're taking the problem with you. So if you're fearful, let's say you're afraid of something, or you're doubtful, or you're confused, if you try to move beyond your fear or beyond the state of confusion, you're going to take the fear with you into the new situation. And the fear that you've got at the moment distorts the future. So you can tell yourself that you're not afraid, but you know that you don't mean it, and you know that really you are afraid, and you're just pretending to yourself that you're not. Which goes back to making a list about, yes, I'm going to become rich, even though I know I'm not, or but, there's a but. So if you try to disguise the fear or pretend that you're not, you're just telling yourself something that isn't true. Maybe it's comforting, but you're trying to reassure yourself, but you don't really have confidence in it. And this can be why it's so hard to solve problems, because we start with the problem, or we start being out of sorts with ourselves because of the problem. We're fearful, we're confused. And the fear and the confusion, or whatever it happens to be, it colours the way we look at things. It colours our outlook and our expectation as well. So again, if you think of it as putting on certain coloured glasses, so everything we see is overlaid with the problem. So we're fearful, we look ahead, we look at our situation, and there's an overlay of fear on it. So we're not seeing clearly. So what do we do? I'm getting to the point now. What do we do instead? And this we kind of have to go back a few videos to talking about, one as unity and two as the reflection of unity. So let's say there's unity or wholeness. And if you think about unity, it has to be harmonious and everything fits together. And so this is why I mentioned at the beginning of this video that the Seinfeld idea of everything evening out over time isn't what's going on. Because unity is harmonious and everything fits together. There is no change. There isn't an evening out or a balancing out of this is bad, this is good, and they find an equilibrium. Because there's unity. And unity is already harmonious and already everything fits together. It doesn't change. So it's not like there are opposites and they cancel each other out. So unity is harmonious, and it's only harmonious. So there's no place for opposites or disruption, because if there could be disruption, then there would be conflict and it would break apart and it would no longer be unity. But unity is everything, so there can't be something outside of everything or apart from it. Okay, so let's say there's unity and it's one and it includes everything. So it includes you two and me. It includes us. So we're part of unity and we share its nature and its qualities and its characteristics. And it's worth spending some time thinking about the nature and the qualities of unity and harmony and what it's like, because we share those qualities and characteristics. So there's unity and its reflection. So unity is, and it isn't aware of itself because it's everything. So there's nothing outside it. So it's not aware, it's not self-aware, but if it wants to be self-aware, it can't create something new or something different. All it can do is create the reflection of itself. So it's a bit like there's a cause and effect. The unity is the cause and the reflection is the effect. But in human life, we make the mistake of seeing the effect or the outcome and assuming it is, or it too is, a cause, but it's an effect. It isn't. It isn't a cause, it's an effect, it's an outcome. It's a reflection of the original. And we get into trouble when we look at the reflection, and I mentioned this before in a video, when we look at the reflection and think that's what's real, that's what's going on. But it isn't, it's a reflection. And there's no point in rubbing away at the reflection to try and change what it looks like. You have to go to the original and make a change there. So there's cause and effect. If you don't like the effect, you don't try and change the effect. You have to go to the cause, make a change in the cause, and then you're automatically going to get a different effect or a different outcome. So if I'm fearful, then that fearfulness is in my thinking, in the reflection, right? It's in the world of effect. It's not in the original creative unity, because the creative unity is harmonious and doesn't know fear. It's not afraid because everything fits together. So if I'm fearful and I try to fix the problem from the state of being afraid, that's not going to work, because I'm going to take fear in with me into the solution. So that's not going to work. So if I'm fearful, I don't try to move forward from a state of fear, because that's taking the fear with me. Instead, what we do is you leap forward to harmony and to unity. So if I'm fearful, I suspend my belief in fear and remember there's unity and its characteristics are harmonious. So I project my mind into not starting with a list of what I want, but I start with recognizing or understanding or remembering that there is unity and it's harmonious, and I'm already there. And within harmony, within unity, within wholeness, that's when I'm going to make the list of what it is that I want to do. But I'm not starting from here. I'm starting from way out, from reality, the wholeness, and the reality of unity and the reality of wholeness. So within that state of mind, that way of thinking, and it's not wishful thinking. I'm not keeping my fingers crossed that it's going to work. I recognize and I understand that there is wholeness, and I'm part of it. So within wholeness, I'm going to make my list of what it is that I want. So think of wholeness as life, and life is going to express itself anyway, whether we cooperate with it or not. But if we can recognize that we are part of life or within life, and life is expressing itself, and life is expressing its unity and its harmony, and that's where we are, then what we come up with, or what we want, or what we decide that we want based on being within harmony, works, and it's true and it's real. And it'll manifest in our life. Don't like to use the word manifest. I came up with a word, and the word is alreadiness. Already, the state of being already in existence, alreadiness. So if we project forward into the whole, into life, okay, so sorry, the screen kept flickering there. Okay, so if we lost my train of thought there. Okay, if in the state of unity or harmony, then the idea already is, it already exists. So what we write down, what we want, is already is. Let me move on a bit and come back to that. So instead of starting from our imperfect condition, where we're fearful or anxious or worried or what it happens to be, instead of starting from an imperfect position and trying to improve it, because we know we're going to take imperfection into the future, what we do is we heave is throw, right? We heave our thinking into the future and start from there, from the idea of wholeness, and maybe work back from it. So let's say you want a bookcase. You can go to a store and you can find a selection of bookcases and you choose one that you like. But it could be that you've got an awkward space that you want to put the bookcase in, so you have to build one, because the space to be filled isn't a regular shape. Okay, so you need to choose the width of the shelving and the depth of the shelving, and is it going to be adjustable or fixed in place? What color is it going to be? What kind of material are you going to use, and so on. So when it comes to things, it's easy enough to make some selection about what the table will look like or what the room is going to look like and so on. But when it comes to living and what your life is going to be like, it's more difficult to choose, let's say. But life is going to express itself anyway, even if we don't participate. But it's up to us to choose the form that the expression will take. So what we need to do is we're anxious or we're fearful. We project, we heave into the future, into unity, and we know unity is going to express, life is going to express itself, and it's up to us to choose what form the expression will take. So we have to make decisions about the quality of life or the quality of the experience, about the direction that the life is going to go in, about the purpose for doing what it does. And maybe we can choose or make decisions about the length of our own life. So we choose the form that the expression of life is going to take. But we start from a sense of alreadiness because it's within the whole and because it's true and it's correct. So it's not like we're pretending to ourselves that everything is okay and everything is fine when we know it's not, or that we can fix something that we know we can't really fix. I don't know what else to say at this point. So the idea is there's unity and wholeness. Start from there. It's going to express itself anyway. We should choose carefully about what form we want the life to take, because the life is going to express itself anyway. And our thinking, our understanding, and our choices determine the kind of experience that we have and the kind of life that we have. But it's important to start from the idea of unity, the number one that contains all, and not start from our personal take or our personal understanding and our personal experience, because mostly what we experience is taking place in the effect, in the reflection, and not in the harmonious unity that is really the starting point for life. Okay, I'll leave that with you and see what you think. If you have comments or questions, or you want to discuss it, let me know, and we'll see what happens. But that's what I think at the moment about what's going on. So I hope it made sense. It makes sense to me, but it's different when you try to explain it or describe it to somebody else. So hopefully you got something from it, and we'll take it from there. Thanks very much. Okay, bye-bye.